Good morning, it's Dr. Dina Churchill, innovator in health and wellness, and today is Saturday, July the 25th. For those of you who don't know, I'm a retired chiropractor, and I was in private practice for 22 years. Part of our neurological assessment or history taking and assessment with patients in the last few years for me involved a pulse oximeter. So this is a device that you put on your finger, and it measures oxygen saturation in your blood and also your pulse rate. So that gives you a marker, or it calibrates fitness in certain areas. So I'm just going to put this on my finger, and you'll see I've just been doing a little experiment this morning. So I've had a mask on. You can see there now it's 96, right? 96 is the first, I know it's backwards, but the first reading is 96. So I've just had a mask on for about 10 minutes. Initially it was 99. So as I keep talking here, you'll probably see that it's gone up even just now, right? To 99 oxygen saturation rate. So I did this little experiment so I could intelligently comment on it. You know, I've seen videos of other people measuring oxygen saturation and also carbon dioxide, you know, underneath the mask. But this morning I took it upon myself to do my own little experiment. So what I noticed after 5 minutes was I was starting to feel a little lightheaded, so I wasn't moving around, and then I did another reading at 5 minutes, and already it was starting to drop from 99% saturation in the blood down to about 98, I think it was, at 3 to 5 minutes. And then it went down to 96, and you just seen that, right? It was 96. That was after I even had the mask off for 5 minutes. Thank you for watching, by the way. Jane, Joel, Terralyn, thank you. Small drop in saturation is significant. Yes. So I'll talk to you about that. So normal saturation, oxygen saturation levels should be about 98 or 99. So we want to have lots of oxygen in the blood. Anything below 90 is concerning. And you know, it would, 85 even is hypoxia, and even 80 would be severe hypoxia, where if you were into emergency and you had an 85% oxygen saturation rate, they would be hooking you up to oxygen. You know, it's an emergency. So you can see even after 5 or 10 minutes, it was down to an area that was below normal for the average population. So imagine if you were wearing this mask all day, what your oxygen saturation would be. Now, what harm could that do, really, right? It could make you dizzy, you might faint, bump your head, you feel lethargic, it's not getting oxygen to your brain, and then in the long term, you're predisposed to having a cardiovascular incident, stroke. So if I had a patient that had a low oxygen saturation rate, they would be a high risk for stroke. We'd want to see their pulse go down, we'd want to see their oxygen saturation go up. So, what is the harm in wearing a mask? It's reducing your oxygen, you know, what we need to survive. So this video really came on the tail end of Dr. Robert Strang, health officer, mandating masks for July 31st in all public places here in Nova Scotia. So let me give you a little bit of history on that. So about when the whole corona scam started, I started emailing the MLAs, the Premier of the province, Dr. Strang, the health minister, with the science behind the lockdown and how the lockdown itself is causing more deaths than this old crazy corona flu cold. You know, the suicides and people that are not getting their treatments, and stress and drug overdoses. And, you know, Dr. Ahmad Gagas, who's a double specialty doctor in Canada, in Ontario, talks about this in a YouTube video where he says, you know, are they flattening the curve or are they flattening you? So anyway, I've been keeping the MLAs and the MPs up to speed on what the alternative, let's say, media is saying and what the science shows, not only regarding the lockdown, but also regarding the masks. And if you want to see an article that I sent to those MLAs, you can check my blog, healthtruth.blog, and it's called Masked Truths. So all the data and information that I collected, I kind of put into this one article so I could share it with friends and government officials. Then last weekend we had a protest against masks here in Nova Scotia, and if you scroll down my Facebook page you can see that I did a live video. Sandra Saunders organized that. Thank you to Sandra. And we had about 20 people. So 20 people is not a lot, right? For a population of about 500,000 here in Nova Scotia. And I had sent information out to media. Thank you, by the way, CTV and Global, for being there and doing the interview. Regardless of what the article said, you know, it was awareness for the public. So again, thank you to the CTV and Global for being there. But I tagged 50 of my friends that are local. You know, none of the people that I tagged showed up. I sent it to all the MLAs, which is 51 in Nova Scotia, and 11 of the members of parliament. None of those guys showed up. But you know who did show up? Was a representative from the National Citizens Alliance. And you may not know this, but this is an alternative federal party for Canada. Now, our mainstream media won't let you know that because these are a citizens alliance. These are the people that are looking after your best interest when it comes to mandatory things that are taking away our personal rights. So the National Citizens Alliance is something that you should investigate. So let's go back to masks and the mask protests. So what did I learn from that, Corey asked me? Well, I learned that there's a lot of ignorance and fear out there because we had anti-mask protesters show up to our protest. So we had this sort of mob of people that arrived right when Sandra was giving her interview with CTV with rattles and wearing masks. And so I took that opportunity to try to interview and entertain conversation with those people. And one lady had suggested that she really didn't want to hear what I had to say. I offered to even do a little oximeter test with her, and she said she wouldn't believe my tools and my diagnosis and my assessment of her, that she would go to the hospital. So when I asked her how long she was going to leave on the mask, because I said, you know, there's been no more deaths from this coronavirus than there is from the flu every year. So there'll be another kind of flu detox, let's call it, in the fall. So are you going to keep your mask on like every year in the fall? Or are you going to like wear your mask? I didn't say it that way. I was very diplomatic. And I said, how long are you going to leave the mask on for? And she said, until, this is the scary part, okay? She said, until they tell me to take it off. Until they tell me to take it off. That's mind control, right? This is a mind control experiment. And as Robert Kennedy Jr. said in a debate with Alan Derkowitz this week that I'd recommend, again, that's also on my Facebook page. He said, we have to remain intellectually open. So some people already have their minds made up about this. They're gonna do what they're told, and they won't think independently. They won't have any free thought, or they won't want to do any investigation. For those people, you have to kind of just dismiss them, like I did with this lady. She obviously didn't hear, thanks Corey, she obviously didn't hear anything I had to say. She was there with a purpose to, as many of the pharma trolls are that show up on our social media, they're there to distract and to discredit you, to try to take you away from your purpose. So when those people show up just to cause trouble and really have no mind or opinion of their own, best to bless and dismiss them and not to engage in that emotion. Although it took every last strength, every last bit of energy I had to kind of resist engaging. I had to sort of walk away as they were kind of shaking these shakers, in our faces as we're trying to do the interview. But this is a very important point. I will leave on the mask until they tell me to take it off. So mask facts. What do you know about the mask? Well, I just showed you how it reduces your oxygen saturation. If you look on the mask box, it says, this does not protect you against the COVID-19 or any virus. Why? Because the pores in masks are measured in millimeters, and this viral material, and a virus is really just dead genetic material, can get through. It can go in here. It can go into your eye. Viral material has to be injected or ingested. So this mask doesn't work. So it reduces the oxygen and it doesn't help with the coronavirus. So why are they mandating it, right? You'll be wondering that. And it also increases transmission because you're fixing it, you're moving it around. I showed a video this week of Dr. Fossey. He had the mask on during while the camera was rolling. As soon as the camera, shut off, he pulls it down, right? So again, there's the germs on your hands, there's germs on your face. There's a difference in a surgeon wearing a surgical mask in a sterile environment and us wearing a mask, shoving it in your purse with all the other junk or your glove box and pulling it out and then putting it on your face. Dr. Judy Merkovitz also says that we have the coronavirus. Most of us have coronavirus or a corona sequence in us. Thank you, Tyrolyn. Protest was staged. Yes, I absolutely believe that. And I'm just going to check here. Corey says, just look at the mask the drywall guys wear. Yes, great. Corey, true, right? The drywall, that's a good example. And afterwards, they take off the mask and they have all the powder around because it's not protecting them. So where was I? The masks increasing, touching, the difference between the surgical masks. And Dr. Zach Bush, who's a triple board certified physician, who I just really love. He's very brilliant and well-researched. And he talks about how these viruses, this viral material in our environment is absolutely necessary in order to challenge our immune system, to make us stronger. It's actually essential for the evolution of our species to be exposed to this viral material, even if it is man-made. In a lab like the coronavirus was. And if you want to go to my blog, again, healthtruth.blog, and you can look, the article's called 21 Vials, and it looks at the connection, the man-made virus, and who, Bill Gates, for example, and the Queen, and who was on the patent for that. And I have all my research in there, and then the Mask Truths is the next article, and all the information I could gather on masks are in there. I'd also invite you to look at Peggy Hall's website, the healthyamerican.org, because Peggy was successful in having this mandate overturned in her city, which was Orange County. So have a look at that as well. But Mask Truths gives you some more of the information. So Dr. Zach Bush, the masks. So I think I've touched on most of the information. So what we did at this protest was Sandra had some of these little cards printed. Now that'll be backwards for you, but mask facts. So just a little card that we could hand out. So it wasn't confrontational at all. It was an educational moment. But I was really disappointed that we didn't have more of a turnout. And this issue is obviously important to people who I've, got questions from. And it's no good anymore to just email your government official. That doesn't work. I've been doing that for 2 years. Again, each MLA, including the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Robert Strang, the Health Minister, Randy Dolores, and the Premier, Stephen McNeil, have at least gotten 6 emails from me since this whole coronavirus. I've never gotten a reply. I get a standard reply back, auto reply, it's been received, we're so busy that we won't be able to get back to you right away. And what I've learned is that they really don't have their own individual voice, right? They are puppets. Otherwise, you would think that they would return my email or have questions. But what's happening, and we see this kind of on a global scale, is that our governments are part of this corrupt circle. And you know, if you go back to a video I did on my YouTube, actually it's removed from my YouTube channel, it's on the BitChute channel, it's called Wake Up World. And in that video, I talk about the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve was a group of rich billionaires that got together and created a privatized bank that start lending money to governments at a real high interest rate. So they could then influence, let's say, government policies. And we see that because the Vaccine Act that was passed in 1986 absolves big vaccine companies of any liability, injury, or death. We haven't that nowhere else in business, except we now see it in the Telecom Act, 1996, that absolves telecom and cellular companies of any liability. And then we see in 2019, Obama passed this one, you know, the Monsanto Act, the group of companies called Monsanto that are poisoning our foods, genetically modifying our foods so they withstand the poison of glyphosate, has his own act in government to protect his company against the liability and cancers and things this causes. So our governments, you see, have put these laws in place to protect these corporations. They are not protecting you. They're not protecting you. This was a big wake-up call for me. It was a big wake-up call to realize that our governments are just puppets for this corrupt cabal. And so now I have friends that say, oh, I sent my letter off to the MLA. That's great. It won't work. They've already put this mandate in place. You know what's going to work. Vote out those people who aren't congruent with your values. And even when I meet a great MLA like I did, he informs me that he's part of a whipped vote. So even if you as an individual, kind of like I was in chiropractic, whipped, right? If you speak about vaccines, we're going to suspend you. We're going to take away your license. This is what they do with medical doctors too. Speak, we pull your license. This is what they'll do to politicians. Speak, you lose your position in the party. This is what we have to overcome, is this idea that they're all powerful and we have no power. Well, we do. We have our voice, which is powerful. We have our human rights. And that is a foundation, a loving foundation that we stand on that nobody can take away. So getting back to what you need to do, you need to be out there protesting with us. You need to be standing up for your rights and freedoms. And I said this too in a post the other day, you know, if you don't have the courage, you know, I'm not really kind of a protest type of girl either, right? I don't really enjoy it. I find it stressful to have that confrontation. But if I'm not going to do it, who is? Who's going to be protecting your kids? This is what I said. It's not even about you anymore. So, okay, it's not too bad. My son says, Mom, don't make a big deal. Just put the mask on, go in the store. No, I'm not. I refuse to take part in that tyranny. I refuse to take part in that corruption. You have to kind of put your foot down and you have to teach your kids to do the same thing. So what are you going to be teaching your kids when you mask them up to go on the bus? Right? To reduce their oxygen in their little brains that are still developing and then put them into a school that maybe has a smart meter, radiation, and hook them up to the 5G technology that's used as a military systems wave. Are you going to do that to your kids? So I would say, mothers and fathers, wake up! Wake up! You know, it's not for me. You're not coming to the protest to help me. You're coming to the protest to stand up for yourself and for your families, because I can't do that for you. I can stand up for me and for my family, but you have to get the courage. You have to take back your power from this corrupt cabal. And there's no scientific evidence that masks work for protecting against viruses. Yes, sure. I mean, it does reduce. If I'm spraying my flower pots, It'll help reduce the aerosol spray. If you're in China, it probably makes sense because there's high particulate matter in the air pollution, and it's going to reduce some of that. It'll act as somewhat of a filter. But it doesn't protect against these viruses. They are lying to you. So this mandate that's been put in place by the Chief Medical Officer of Nova Scotia is lying. He's lying to you. This will not protect. And why are they doing it now? Because the coronavirus is over. I think I had it back in February. There were a lot of people that were sick in January and February. I think that was the man-made virus that they spread around. Then they created the, pandemic and the lockdown. I mean, there's no greater deaths, like I said, than there is from flu in any year. So I lost my train of thought. They're lying to you. It's not valid. It's not true. And you need to take back your power. So the mask truths were these little cards that we handed out at the protest. And I want to thank Tara Lynn. I see you there. Till lack of oxygen vaccine induced brain damage. Yes, thank you. That's a good point, right? Without oxygen, you will encounter brain damage. Attempting to dumb us down. Yes. And thank you, Tara Lynn, because Tara Lynn and also Shanna Joy came from New Brunswick. They drove from New Brunswick to help us with our protest here in Nova Scotia, when our Nova Scotians are sitting home masked up, right? They're sitting masked up. So thank you, Tara Lynn and Shannon, who came and to try to help support the cause here. So we handed out these little cards that Sandra had made. So it decreases oxygen intake. We talked about that. Increases toxic inhalation. So Dr. Judy Markovits talks about that. We all have the coronavirus in our system. If you've had a cold, especially if you had the flu shot. By the way, if you've had the flu shot, the RNA sequence, you're more likely to die from this virus because it's like having a double dose, so Dr. Judy says. But if you have the corona sequence in your body, then you're increasing the concentration by wearing a mask. If you have a cough and you're not sure, because there's some literature out there that suggests that it's not a virus, that actually in the lab they kind of spliced it and made it, put this viral material into a bacteria. I kind of believe that in feeling the cough that I had for 4 weeks. I think it was kind of a man-made splice, and in the scans that I did of myself in the technology that I use, which is the quantum biofeedback Genius system, it showed my own scans not only having a virus but also a bacteria at the same time. So the masks will help protect against certain bacteria that are larger, like pneumonia, like TB, like whooping cough. So there is a place for masking. And in a population, if you had a cold and you had to be with someone, you couldn't stay home, there may be a place for mask. But as far as masking an entire population, it's ludicrous. It's never been done anywhere in history. It's crazy. So increasing concentration, and then it shuts down your immune system. Why does it shut down your immune system? Because you're depriving your body of oxygen. I'm just gonna see, Shannon says, you had it in February too, 99% sure it was COVID. Yeah, but I'm not gonna go for the test, and I'm sure you're not, Shannon, either. That's something else. I just have to make a note to talk to you about the test in just a second. And Tara Lynn says we had another 36 people participate in March and a photo op because they were deterred. Okay. Large droplets. If you're sick, you can stay home. Yes. Well, when we had, that's a great point. We've had viruses around. Dr. Zach Bush says there's 5,000 identified and probably another 5,000 more. They've been around since the beginning of time. In fact, the viruses stimulates our body to change so we can adapt to a changing environment. So the viruses are helpful. And what have we done in the past? We have sailed through pandemics, the Black Plague, and we've had the swine flu that was brought on by vaccination, for example, and the Spanish flu, which was also brought on by mass vaccination. But we got through that without masking and locking down our entire healthy population. This is mind control. It's mind control. And that lady at the protest, I will keep it on until they tell me to take it off. This is what's happening. So let's go back. If you have your second wave, decrease immune. Okay, yes, I'm just going to talk about that too, Chris. Thank you for that. Esther Brooks, Chris, and COVID stands for Certification of Vaccine Identification. Thank you, Corey. Coming worldwide. Okay, good. So I might miss something as I'm going along because I kind of get distracted, but I will come back to your questions for sure at the end. And then what else do we have on? Shuts down the immune system. So we mentioned it reduces oxygen, but it also covers your face, your smile. And there's an important part of our immune system that is the social vagus, it's called. And it's very important for stimulating our immune system. So you're taking away that cue, that social cue. That's really important. Increases the virus risk, again, because you're touching, scientifically inaccurate. Like I said, you can look at the science, and I'll post articles on this feed so you can see that. And the effectiveness is not studied. That's right. You know, the studies that are out there aren't that great, and there's no scientific proof that you know, masks even work. So thank you, Sandra, for doing up those little cards that we handed out at the protest. Also want to say thank you to Johnny McLeod and Chris Smith, who I did a sort of an interview, a conversation with last night on a podcast until midnight. But it was brilliant. You know, it really stimulated a lot of thought and ideas. And I just posted that on my Facebook page, Atlantic Underground. So if that'll be a more detailed kind of analysis, and you have Chris and Johnny's view on things as well, and we toss around ideas about Bill Gates and vaccines and masking and psychology and a whole bunch of things. So it was kind of a fun video for me to do. Not too much keeps me awake until midnight, but that interview I think you'll find some value in. So that's posted on the Facebook page. And again, thanks Johnny for that opportunity. So what do we want to do right now? We want to know our rights, because they are using your fear and ignorance to control you, right? These corrupt cabal are using fear and ignorance to control you. And I don't think all the government officials are corrupt. I think there's some good people in there. But like I said, they're whipped. They have to, you know, come in line and do what the party tells them to do. So we have to know what our rights are. This is a recommendation, right? This is not a law. You're not going to get put in jail if you don't put the mask on. This is a recommendation. And there was some great feedback. I know the Patriot page and Chris Sly. I just seen Sandra come on there. Sandra, was that Chris Sly who started this Unmasks Canada event? And if so, if you wanted to post a link to his page or a link to him, I think that's inspiring for other people. Chris Sly, who started this Unmasks event. So it wasn't just here in Halifax. It went across Canada. It was in 11 major cities across Canada, where we're trying to bring awareness to masks and understand that. I just see Harold come in there from Quebec, and I watched a video, Harold, of a guy in Quebec who was wrestled to the ground because he didn't wear a mask. This is crazy. This is ludicrous, because this mask wearing idea infringes upon our human rights. You know, it's a civil issue where the police force are there to you know, bring justice and can punish you for crimes. But not wearing a mask so you can breathe is not a crime. It's a crime what they're doing to you. So if a police officer detains you for not wearing a mask, you can countersue. You can countersue. This is against your human rights and freedoms. They are the ones that are in fault. So there is a card, and I just had this conversation on Andrea's page this morning, that you can put on your phone, that you can print and put in your wallet, that may help diffuse a situation where you're refusing to wear a mask. And this just says, I'm exempt from provincial health officer regulation mandating face mask usage. Wearing a face mask poses significant health risk to me. I, under the CHRA and PIPA, which is the medical Privacy Act and the Disability Act, 16 cities. Thanks, Sandra. Celebration of Rights and Freedoms. So, Sandra, if you could put, Sandra organized, or one of the organizers for a local event, but if you wanted to put that link up to Chris Sly or how people can know more about what's happening, that would be great. And I see Chris, rollout of radio. Yes, so that's true, Chris. Every time there's a rollout, a different change over the history. I've seen that and read about it. There's a, let's say, epidemic in the population as we're getting used to that change in radiation and frequency change. So the 5G is definitely part of it. But this card says, you know, violation of disability rights under the Canadian Human Rights Act or Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There's a number on there that you can call. And the Canadian Human Rights Act not only prohibits discrimination at the federal level, it also establishes Human Rights Commission system to administer and enforce the act. So Vaccine Choice Canada, if you don't know about that, Vaccine Choice Canada is a group of parents of vaccine-injured children. I'm just trying to find the thing from Rocco. Here we go. It's a group of parents. It's a website that will have lots of resources for you. And this group of parents has hired a lawyer, one of the best constitutional lawyers, Rocco Galanti. And he has taken and filed suit for these measures, these lockdown measures, locking us down, wearing a mask, talking about keeping us locked down until a vaccine is available. So if you're not aware of Vaccine Choice Canada, I encourage you to go to their website, vaccinechoicecanada.com, sign up for their newsletter so at least you can be kept aware of what's happening in our national body. And if you feel so inspired, you could donate to the cause. Again, this is a nonprofit parent group, so they'd appreciate, I'm sure, your donation and support in that way. But Vaccine Choice Canada. So Rocco Galati is the lawyer that is spearheading this movement. And this was his tweet that he put out. I'm just going to read this. Lots are calling him regarding masking advice. Don't call, he says. If you're refused entry or service, even after you provide a medical note or your little badge that says you're exempt, which you're not even required to do by law, you can just say, I can't wear a mask. I can't wear a mask. And because of your medical privacy is protected, they can't ask you why. You're not obliged to tell them why. You just say, I can't wear a mask, and you just walk right in. But he says, if you state that you are exempt, then make a complaint to your provincial Human Rights Commission and ask for monetary damages. This is really important. We have to know what our rights are, so if they're infringed upon, and I'll post a video about that too. So if they're infringed upon, you can countersue. And by countersuing pushes these bullies back. You know, Donald Trump said in his book, Think Big, this was the one quote I remembered. You know, it's not a real brilliant quote, but he says, you know, sometimes you have to punch a bully in the nose. So when they're coming after you, wanting to mask you and your kids and reduce your oxygen, are you going to sit by and say, okay? Or are you going to stand up and say, hell no, I'm not going to reduce the oxygen supply to my brain or my kids. Are you nuts? Do that again and I will sue you. And this is what I'd said to the MLAs in a letter, was that if this vaccine is mandated, which is what Justin Trudeau had said, right? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had said back in May that they will keep us locked down. They will keep us running around in fear and ignorance until there's a vaccine available. Not. I don't think so. So what I'd said to the MLAs and to the Health Minister, Dr. Robert Strang, is that there is evidence. Dr. Judy Murkowicz's Plandemic on BitChute, check it out on that platform if you haven't. And there's also a 2-minute clip that is in my article called Masked Truths, and that's at healthtruth.blog. 2-minute clip where she says, if this vaccine is mandated, this COVID-19 vaccine, 50 million people will die. Why? Because they already have vaccine injury from the flu shot, right? So this is scary, but they can't claim ignorance. Dr. Robert Strang or Randy Dolores or the Premier can't claim ignorance if they've been notified in advance, right? If they've been notified, they are people. and they need to be held accountable. So this idea of countersuing is what we need to do in order to push them back and to not surrender to the process. And it's really an occult process, a mind control, putting you in a mask, locking you down. It's cultish, and you can agree to it and wait for them to tell you when you can go out of your house, when you can wear a mask, when you can get the vaccine, or you can know what your rights are and stand up for them. So it's illegal to detain you for not smothering yourself with a mask, and countersuing, that's important. And again, I'll post that article. So again, this is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. So if the police get involved, and that's the other thing. So when we were preparing this mask event in Halifax, not only did I notify the MLAs and the MPs and invited them to come, again, like I said, we had no representation from any other federal party but the National Citizens Alliance. And thank you, Adrian, for coming and doing the videos and sharing them with your group. But I also had emailed the Halifax Police Department and shared with them that article, Mask Truths, also shared with them and the MLAs the fact that Rocco Galante, through Vaccine Choice Canada, is taking the Canadian government to court for these unconstitutional measures. But the Halifax Police Department didn't respond. So I'd sent two emails. One was just to a constable, and then I got bumped up to Inspector Carolyn Nichols, and suggested that, you know, there may be a police presence required, because there's often, when there's a protest, some anxiety and counter protests. But anyway, they didn't arrive, but they have the information. So if the police, you know, is trying to enforce this, you know, smothering policy, asphyxiation, then you can kindly point out to them your rights and freedoms and threaten to sue if you're detained in any way. So the thing we have to do is to avoid emotion. Thank you, Terlin, National Citizens Alliance. I see you posted Rocco and the Vaccine Choice Canada, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, if you have any questions, if you have any mask videos or pictures or information, or if I'm saying something incorrectly, feel free to correct me, to post, to share. Again, we're a team. We're working together, so I appreciate that feedback. But to avoid the emotion, so it's pretty hard, right? When you're feeling threatened, this really tests the constitution of your humanity. When you're being threatened and you're being assaulted in being forced or asked to you know, do something that's against not only maybe your values, but against life, to take away your oxygen, it's hard to maintain your composure. The natural reflex, you know, this kind of is to push back. And I would encourage you to kind of find the strength within yourself to maintain your composure, because this is where you can get in trouble and where it may become a criminal offense if there's some sort of assault on your part, even if it's just perceived, right? So you have to maintain your composure, not get emotional about it, and just share the information. You know, these people that are working, this is another thing, right? All public places. So you go into a restaurant. I can imagine myself going into Heartwood on Campool Road, my favorite vegetarian restaurant, with my mask. I won't be wearing it, or I won't be going there. So I hope you hear me. Any of the restaurants that I frequent, I won't be going there if I have to wear a mask. But I'll refuse, and I'll have my little card with me and say I can't wear a mask. And I won't be nasty about it, right? But imagine going to a restaurant. Okay, I'll just picture this. You go into your restaurant, okay, you sit down, you have your meal, and then you have to, like, take your mask, take a bite. Maybe, do you have to put it back on while you chew? And then you take it down again and have another bite? I mean, it's totally, totally foolish, right? It's ridiculous. So, know that. But again, I'm trying to make light and try to keep a little humor, because that makes it funny, right? That diffuses fear and anxiety, is to create humor. So if you can create a little humor about it, it will help kind of reduce the emotion. And know that the people that are working in the industry, right? These service workers, whether it's the waiter, the cashier, the bus driver, they didn't sign up to be regulators of a mask policy, right? They didn't sign, it's not in their job description. They're there truly just to serve you. And ultimately, the customer's well-being is what they're concerned about. So don't take out your frustration on them. They're there trying to feed their family. They've been told they have to say this to every customer that comes in, or every patron that gets on the bus or whatever. But that doesn't mean you have to follow it, right? You can just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't wear a mask. Smile. No, I'm sorry, I can't wear a mask. And you have then your little card that you can keep in your phone to flash them. And no, you don't need the card, but sometimes that kind of diffuses the situation. And then you can ask to speak to the manager, and you can point out the Medical Privacy Act and the Disability Act that protects you, and that is your foundation. So again, be kind, smile, try to make a joke if you can, you know, oh, it must be terrible wearing those masks, right? It's all sweaty and everything. But be firm in your convictions. So if they think that somehow you're uncertain, you will get overpowered. And this is it, right now. We have to own our power. We have to take back our power, and we have to stand in it and be certain. And those who are most certain win the game. Those who can be pushovers and will just wear the mask, it's just a mask, I'm just gonna wear it. No, you're not gonna wear it. You're gonna take it off, and you're gonna stand in your power, and you're not gonna let them reduce the oxygen to you and your family. But be firm in your convictions. The service people are just doing their job. Use that opportunity to educate. Show them the picture of the mask box that says it doesn't protect against the COVID virus. Let them know they're being lied to. Send them the information that shows how it reduces oxygen. And if you need an article with all those in it, Mask Truths at my blog, healthtruth.blog. So I canceled my appointment with my acupuncturist when she said I had to wear a mask. My esthetician, my hairdresser, my chiropractor let me go in without the mask. But it's an opportunity to educate. And ultimately, businesses, these small businesses are suffering. Chris had a great point last night in the podcast, and he said, do you think they're doing this? Do you think they're putting these small businesses in the role of being enforcers for this policy in hopes of getting rid of the small business? And I would say, yes, I think that was part of their agenda. They're using the small business. So ultimately, who's going to suffer? The business itself is going to suffer by putting this in. So Rick from BC had sent me this, and this was brilliant, Rick Dignard. And this was something that businesses, so if you're a business owner, you can put this up in your window, and it says, attention customers. So again, this is on my post, and I will post it on this live video too. It says, attention customers, those in our lovely government, humor, have ordered all persons entering indoor facilities to wear a mask. If you have a medical condition, they're priming you, right? They're suggesting, that prevents you from wearing a mask, you are exempt from this order. Under Canadian Human Rights Act and PIPA, no one can legally ask you about your medical condition. Therefore, if we see you in our store, in our facility, without a mask, we will assume you have a medical condition. And we will welcome you inside to support our business. So the government is pitting, again, they're creating division between you as the customer and the business owner. But what we have to do is have our little card that says, I'm exempt, and have our business owners to post this sign saying, we've been advised for you to wear a mask, but if you're not wearing a mask, we'll assume you have a medical condition, is brilliant, because then we take the corrupt government out of the situation, right? So knowing your rights, avoiding emotion, send information to the company. So you can send this sign that I'm going to post to companies, to restaurants where you know, spread it around, share the joy of this this infringement of our human rights, and we can take that back. But we need numbers, we need you, and we need the businesses to be on board. The other thing is, again, like I said, follow through with legal action. If I was that guy in Quebec that got wrestled to the ground for not wearing a mask, I would have those officers sued. So if you're in a situation where you're feeling threatened, live video it. or videotape it, because that then can be used to prove your point. Otherwise, you're looking for witnesses or whatever if you have it on a live video. So that's why you need to maintain your composure. While you're not emotional, you're just standing in your truth for your rights and freedoms. But then follow through with legal action. So litigate anybody that infringes upon your right, anyone that's trying to take away your oxygen for you and your children. So I mentioned that the deaths from this corona scam, this man-made coronavirus, is no different than the flu. The science shows us from what we do have that this idea is not for your protection. It's actually a sign of your submission. It's a mind control game. It's a cult activity. And Dr. Robert Strang says, we're getting people used to the masks, right? Preparing for the second wave. So let's talk about the second wave. And there's an article on my blog, healthtruth.blog, called Second Wave of Any Virus. In the fall of every year, you will notice that there is a viral detox. Dr. Zach Bush talks about that. I have him referenced in the article. If you want more information, you can go there. He says that because the deciduous trees are losing their leaves, there's lower oxygen in the air. Because the temperature gets cooler in North America anyway, especially in Canada, that the particulate matter in the air goes up. So there's more pollution in the air. So the cold weather, the reduction in oxygen are two factors that allow us to virally detox around that time. So as nature is detoxing, losing leaves, things are dying, our bodies go through that transformation. It happens every year. This year, it's going to be tied to the resurgence of coronavirus, or as Bill Gates had said in a video recently, they're developing another virus. You know, this one was just a drill to see how we responded, but they'll be developing something else. So again, we need to stand up now. It's a critical time. Now I just lost my train of thought. Where was I? So we have to stand up for our rights and freedoms right now. Viral detox in the fall, thanks. So it happens every year. This year they're going to try to tie it to either a second wave of corona or COVID-19, or they may create a new virus. But why is it going to be? We talked about this on the podcast last night. So again, thanks to Chris Smith and Johnny McLeod for that Atlantic Underground podcast you'll find on my blog. But we talked about this last night. So they've kept us in our homes in lockdown. We are under stress, which increases cortisol. They have reduced our oxygen, which also decreases our immunity. They have kept us from our family and friends. They have affected our economy, our social life, our physical activities. Really, if you look at the 7 parts of your life, even our spirituality, they've affected by, locking us out of our churches and telling us we can't sing, taking away our church books. So this corrupt government policies have affected every part of they've already suppressed our immune system, right? We're already weakened. Now, what's going to happen, and I've confirmed this with both Rogers in a live, so I called Rogers and I did a live video, so I have it on tape. I also called TELUS, did another live video, I have it on tape, where they say this 5G rollout will happen in every city in Canada by the end of the year, 2020. It's already rolled out in the major cities. What does that mean? This will coordinate and correlate and make this second viral detox maybe a little more intense than it is in any other year. Somebody, I think it was Estabrook Chris, had talked about this. And Chris, if you have a resource for that history that you mentioned, every time they increase the frequency, radio waves, internet, over history and over time, we see kind of a viral outbreak or a sickness, a pandemic in our society. So if you have a resource for that, Estabrooks Chris, or Chris Estabrooks, please feel free to include it. So, and what about this 5G technology? Well, this was rolled out in Wuhan, China. So Dr. Zach Bush says he could have predicted Wuhan would be the place of the outbreak because of the high particulate matter in the air, very polluted. So their lungs are already susceptible. Then they had kind of like a flu shot that went around, and at the same time, they pumped out 60 gigahertz. 60 gigahertz. So we're on 4G right now, or 3G, and it's about 2.4 gigahertz. So they went from 2.4 to 60 gigahertz. So your cells are being bombarded 60 billion times a second with radiation. That's what happened in Wuhan, China. What are some of the side effects of 5G technology? Well, 5G means fifth generation cellular technology. Rogers confirmed for me, they have on their website, that these radiation values go from 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz. So the military, because they use 95 gigahertz as a military systems wave, a microwave, they use for crowd control and mind control. The military has lots of studies on the dangers of this, right? Because they use it as a weapon. Yeah, the cruise ship. Thank you for that, Chris. The cruise ship had also, what was the name of that cruise ship? Victoria Lines or something? The cruise ship that everyone was secluded on had also rolled out the 5G technology. Dana Ashley did a video on that. Love Dana Ashley. MissDanaAshley.com is a great website for you to sign up to in case the censorship continues and her YouTube channel goes down. MissDanaAshley, all one word.com. So the 95 gigahertz the military has information on, because this is what they use as a military weapon wave. But the 300 gigahertz is unheard of. There has been no studies, as far as I know. If you have a study, please post it. And what's most concerning is when I talked to these cellular companies, Rogers and Telus, and asked, do you have any safety studies? They said, Health Canada and the World Health Organization has given us their approval. Well, you know who the largest investor in the World Health Organization is? Bill Gates. So you see, there's a corrupt group at the top, and they're mandating this for everybody underneath. All our associations, our government, our medical association, and everybody is following suit without question. Okay, we put on the mask. Yeah, okay, no problem. No, and employees should be refusing to go to work, right? Refusing to go to work if they have to wear masks. They could, lose oxygen to their brain, fall down, hit their head. They're less productive, they're lethargic. Anyway, back to the 5G technology. So there's no scientific studies. They have put a law in place in 1996, so they knew it was coming. They put a law in place to protect cellular companies against any liability. But just like Monsanto in 2013 had the Monsanto Act, we still, sued them for $2 billion for a cancer case because of this glyphosate and Roundup, and won. And he had to join Bayer because the stocks are going down. So even though they've been kind of sneaky in putting these laws in place to protect the company, we still have our human rights. This is what our foundation is. It's our human rights and freedoms. But if you don't stand up for it, they will walk all over you. They're not there to protect you, right? Chris says 300 gigahertz will fry us. Yes, Sanders says, ironically, they appear to have reached natural herd immunity on the cruise ship at only 17%. Marie Claude is also watching. Thank you all. And for Tara Lynn posted Miss, and it's Miss Dana Ashley, MISS Dana Ashley, Tara Lynn, MISS, because somebody took over, tried to steal her name. So it's MISS Dana Ashley. Thank you for that. So the fall detox, that article that I wrote called Second Wave tells you what you can do. First, again, is keeping your own body healthy. And part of that keeping your body healthy is not to wear that mask, to get out, get sunshine, to eat organic if you can, to exercise, try to keep good thoughts, keep in good humor. All that supports your immune system. So we're better able to deal with what's coming. This is a practice run, in my opinion. This is a drill. This is a test. This is just like the toilet paper test that they did, right? When they had recommended that you go buy toilet paper for this respiratory virus. What was with that? What was with that with the media? That was just a test to see how many people were plugged in to that narrative, because they needed you to be stuck, glued to your TV, hearing how many deaths or how many cases there are every hour. They needed to keep you in fear and ignorance in order to control you. So right now, this is another test. This is another mind control test of who's going to submit to the narrative. Is that going to be you? Are you submitting? Because if you are, what's next on the agenda, first was toilet paper, then it was the mask. Do you know what's next on the agenda? The vaccine. They've already said, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has already said, we're keeping you locked down, we're keeping you in the mask until we have a vaccine. They will plan it. This is my thinking. They will plan that you have your mask on when the fall comes. So when we see the more cases of viral detox, let's say, and they will call it maybe COVID-19, but the 5G will be out, our bodies are having to adapt to the radiation, they will call it the second wave of corona. And they will say, the masks didn't work, the lockdown and social distancing didn't work, now you're going to have your vaccine, right? This is the stage 3. So first is the test. Hello, are you in? Are you in? Toilet paper, toilet paper. Yep, they're on the hook. Now, let's see if they'll do the action step of actually reducing their oxygen. Freemasons are running this show. Let's see, it's a game for them. Let's see how many are gonna put on the mask and reduce their oxygen. Let's see how many out there will blindlessly follow this recommendation and will mask up their kids and send them to school. It's a test. Because next is this mandatory vaccine. Now, why is that foolish? Anyone? Why? Time for vaccines. Yes, Tierlin. Why is it foolish? Well, most of you know my thoughts on vaccines. So let me just give you a little bit of history. In my chiropractic practice, I would see a new baby, beautiful new baby. I love babies. And we would do neurological tests, eye tracking, all assesses the nervous system, primitive reflexes, movements, motor control, milestones at different ages. It all suggests a healthy nervous system, which is what chiropractors treat, neuromusculoskeletal specialists. So what I would notice is that I would have a baby with a perfectly normal assessment, neurological signs and symptoms. But after a series of vaccines, suddenly they would disappear. So primitive reflexes that had gone away return. A baby that's crawling stops crawling. A baby now, doesn't track, doesn't have good eye track. I mean, all sorts of weird things. So much so that I thought, you know what? This is crazy. The vaccines are causing injury. Now, because I had my own kids, I researched it really well, and I refused to vaccinate my own children. But I've seen these injuries, and again, this is really concerning. So what you can do as parents, don't believe what I say. I mean, this is what was good for me and my kids. You need to know what's good for you and your kids. And the vaccines have a little insert, like a product list, an ingredient list. If it doesn't, and your doctor doesn't supply it, Vaccine Choice Canada would help you out with that. Or Children's Health Defense with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Or Del Bigtree at the Highwire. These are great resources for vaccine information. But what I learned, and then continued to learn over that 20-year period, was that there's heavy metals, and the heavy metals were increased in 1975. So there's mercury derivatives, there's aluminum. And now, okay, let's say you know nothing about vaccines, because vaccines really weren't part of my formal training, right? It's what I taught myself as a mother because I wanted the best for my children. So what I learned, right, is we are limiting aluminum in our pots and pans. We're not wanting to have aluminum in our water. We test our water to make sure there's no aluminum and mercury, heavy metals, because we know it causes brain damage. But why are we injecting it into a child? It doesn't make sense. So not only do we have the heavy metals and the polysorbate, the toxins, polysorbate 80 and fetal cells, aborted fetal cells that can create cancers, and retroviruses, as Judy Markovitz says. You can read the book, The Plague. She talks about retroviruses because they grow this vaccine tissue on monkey and mouse. The DNA from the monkey and mouse get put into us. And then they cause disease because we're humans. We have human DNA. We weren't meant to be a mouse. We weren't meant to have monkey DNA in us, injected into us. So what she found, Dr. Judy Markovits, who identified and isolated the HIV and made a link between AIDS and also chronic fatigue, is that there are millions of cases of chronic fatigue and AIDS that were caused from the vaccine lab. So why did I surrender my chiropractic license to tell you this truth? Because it's important. It's important for your kids, right? It's important for the health of our humanity. But now, what they've done with this new COVID vaccine, and Celeste Solum, who is a researcher of the FEMA, and that's the Federal Emergency Emergency Measures Act, has a BitChute. I posted it on my BitChute channel. So the videos that are taken down from my YouTube channel because of censorship, they don't like truth, I upload on a BitChute channel, and I love that platform because they're allowing us to share truth. But I posted that article. I think I'll post it from Celine, because she talks about what's happening with this new COVID vaccine. Is that they're using something called DARPA, which is a defense research project, DARPA hydrogel. So it's nanoparticles in the new vaccine. So not only do you have all the other stuff from vaccines, now they're starting to genetically change and put nanoparticles in you. Yes, thank you, Terlin. Simian virus 40, it came from vaccines, that came from the monkey, the root of most cancers. Thanks, Chris Estabrook. And Nagalase, Nagalase, is something you can look up. Many of the researchers that were studying Nagalase with the vaccines were mysteriously disappeared. They were suicided, Clinton suicide squad, or any of the big pharmaceutical companies. So this research, if you can't find it on Google, because Google was bought out by a pharmaceutical company, you can go to a Brave browser is how you can find this information, and DuckDuckGo is a search engine that I'd recommend. But thank you for that, Chris and Tara Lynn. Just started reading that book. Thanks, Laura. So our first book is called Plandemic, Judy Markovits, and the second one is the first book is called The Plague. The movie is The Plandemic, and her second book is The Plague of Corruption. But it was Dr. Fossey, the guy who was in the video with the mask on his chin, who's making all these rules about the COVID-19, who took over her research and fired her, bankrupted her, and told her she had to keep quiet. And because she didn't keep quiet, they put her in jail. And so Dr. Judy Markovits is a truth warrior, really. She's gone through a lot personally in order to bring you those truths. So that's important information. But now I forget where I was talking about the vaccine for COVID. So they have something called hydrogel with these nanoparticles. So what I forgot to mention last night, Chris, in the video, you said, yes, they have nanotechnology available now, right? They can inject something, it can go to your artery that's clogged and remove it and take it away. But from my understanding of what's happening with this new COVID-19 vaccine and the hydrogel is that it actually blends in with your DNA. It becomes part of you. So in essence, you are part of a nanotechnology that can then interface with AI technology. Your blood pressure, your mood, your body, your location, everything can be tracked through this nanotechnology that they're putting into your body. So not only have they genetically modified our food, not only have they genetically modified animals and cloned animals, now they are trying to genetically modify you. Why? Power and control. Look up Agenda 2030. It's the colonization of our humanity. I know that probably seems a little far out if you're just hearing this information for the first time, but it's a part of manipulation and control. So this particular virus, once you have this vaccine, because if you've had the other vaccines, thanks, Terlin, for that PubMed article, I'm not sure what it is. Hi, Melanie and Laura, you both bought both books. Save the books because we know so save the books, yes, for sure, because they're trying to censor everything. But this vaccine is more dangerous than the others. So if you've had other vaccines and you have vaccine injuries, autism, eczema, again, the Children's Health Defense has a PDF, and if somebody's watching and wants to put that up, they have a slideshow of all the chronic diseases that are more in the vaccinated population. So this causes disease, right? We know vaccines cause disease, but in some cases we can detox from the heavy metals with homeopathy, with things like carbon-60, with dichromaceous earth, with zeolite, with different chemicals. There's ways that we can improve our health if you've been vaccine injured. But if you have this COVID-19 vaccine, if you survive, right? Because Dr. Judy Markovitz says 50 million will die because they're already vaccine injured. So this additional insult will really take out a large segment of the population. If you survive, you will be then part of part of that artificial intelligence, and it alters your DNA. So you are no longer pure human. You are a hybrid if you have this vaccine. So this is step one. The vaccine is step two. So I would say, if you're not out protesting about masks, if you're not hustling your MLAs and voting for parties that have similar values like the National Citizens Alliance, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to mandate the vaccines? Because it's coming. If we don't stand up for our rights and freedoms, this is the agenda. This is what they've planned out. And you can look at the Event 201. Again, we talked about this last night in the podcast. They planned this in October 2019. They got together and they planned exactly how it would roll out, how many countries would be affected, what governments would institute. The rich, the elite, these billionaires that are controlling the narrative even bought pandemic bonds. They bought bonds so they could make money on the pandemic in our society. This is the sickness that we're dealing with, right? Bill Gates has a motive to depopulate. If you go on a TED Talk, again, don't believe me. He says it right from his own mouth on a TED Talk. TED Talk, Bill Gates, depopulation. This is the agenda. The World Health Organization has an agenda. 1973 mandate to kill using vaccines. I know that sounds dark, but it's the truth. And if you don't know it, your destiny is going to be a lot darker. Any other questions? Laura, thank you for watching, everyone. So I talked about following through with legal action. I talked about it's not for your protection. Really, it's just to check and make sure that you're still in the program, that you're still part of the narrative, that you haven't owned your own mind and own body yet, and that you're willing to give it up to our governments that have really a lot less intelligence about this than you do. But it's a practice run. That's my most important point. It's that this is a practice run for something far greater, for something far more grave. And if you don't take back your power, who will? The government is not looking after you. And then, so there's Sandra and Tara Lynn and Bobby Grace and Diane and 20 of us down there, marching down through Halifax, being assaulted, verbally by this mob. Where were you? You were not there? Is it because you want to wear the mask? Is it because you're waiting for the vaccine? Wake up! And then the greatest crime is not fear and ignorance. Because I've been there, right? I believed the government was looking after me. That's why I've been hassling the MLAs for 2 years. But I haven't had any response back. So I know they're not, upstanding citizens. They're puppets for a greater agenda. 2030. Rosa Kaur is the resource I would give you for that. And she's written a book called Behind the Green Mask. If you haven't read that, that's another great book. But so the agenda, you need to sort of stand up and take back your power, because there's nobody looking after you but you. But I'm saying it can be done. So last night on the podcast, I suggested, know the information. These are some checkpoints just before we finish. So if you have any other comments or questions, I'll check back. We need to vote our freedom fighters into elected office. Yes, Tara Lynn. We absolutely do. And again, what I've, yeah, thanks, Chris. Agenda 20, it was Agenda 21, now it's Agenda 2030 because we're climbing close to, 2021. So they've had to extend it out, the depopulation plan, the globalization and regionalization, bringing people into the cities is kind of like the first step of this communitarianism, which is the word I couldn't say last night, trying to get people into kind of the cities, and what they're going to say is the greater good is more important than your own individual rights and freedoms. So they have kind of an agenda with like 27 different steps. It was put forward in 1992. President Bush was in power then. It was a big event that they held in Brazil, and this is where the United Nations started with this. It's under the guise, this Agenda 2030, it's under the guise of sustainable development. And they're looking, the whole climate change scam and all these things, they're looking at ways that they can scare you into thinking the world is going to end if you don't do these things, and that your rights aren't important. Well, that's bullshit. Human rights and freedoms are important. We're free men and women on the land. Don't let them take that away from you. So don't let them take that away. Know the information, empower yourself, or you will be overpowered. Refuse that which is harmful. Refuse that which is harmful. So, masks. Smart meters. I don't know if you knew this, but you have an option to opt out of a smart meter. A smart meter on your house, they had a mandate come through here. Halifax Water actually, through Neptune Company, actually threatened to turn off my water 2 years ago because it was mandated. You see, anytime I see the word mandated, like it kind of chills. I think, ooh, why are they mandating that policy? Mandated organ donation, mandated vaccines, mandated smart meters. Part of this globalization is part of that corruption. So anytime you see the word mandate, be concerned. But I thought, why are they doing this? So I start researching. Thank you to Karen McDonald out in Saskatchewan who gave me some information about smart meters. There are radiation surveillance boxes on the side of your home. They upgraded, right? Why did they upgrade? Because they wanted to work on a Wi-Fi network. So when the 5G technology comes through, it will communicate to your smart meter, and in essence, it will lock you into a radiation home. So you can opt out of that smart meter. You can get covers for it. You can get covers for your routers. There's lots of things that you can do to protect yourself against this, EMF radiation. But the smart meters are something that you should try, and Nova Scotia Power and Halifax Water allows you to opt out. But again, I had to kind of do a song and dance with the council, city council and media and scream really loud to get different people involved just to not have them put a dangerous surveillance box on my home. So again, I've already set that stage. They have the information. There's an opt-out package. Thank you to Matt Whitman and Sean Clary with the Halifax City Council who helped me with that. And but you didn't even know you had an option, and you didn't even question why they were mandating it and what the dangers were. So you'll see this is all part, and Chris pointed this out last night, it's not just our governments, our city councils are part of this globalization agenda 2030 as well. So the vaccines, the 5G, the GMO foods, it's all the sex trafficking business, they're all owned by the billionaires that have no value on human health and have a mandate to kind of depopulate our planet. So it's a different vibration, it's a different energy. Your antidote to that is to rise into love and wisdom. And again, on my Health Truth Up blog, there's an article called Raising Your Vibration or Raising Your Energy, and that would be another good resource for you to kind of, maintain yourself and your constitution as we're going through all these different challenges. But if you stay silent, that gives consent. So it's no good for 20 of us to be down at Halifax Waterfront and you say, oh, they're doing it. Thanks, Dina. Thanks. I go, thank you for doing that. Thanks. Yeah. But why are you sitting home and why am I down there, right? Why am I willing to sacrifice my livelihood for my kids and you're sitting home and not doing anything? It doesn't make any sense, right? So the intellectually open, the brightest people, this is like a Darwinian experiment. The brightest people, the most courageous people will survive this. The ones that are weak in spirit and in heart will have a different fate. So I would ask you, You know, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? Now's the time. So I think it was Einstein who said, you know, and I can't remember this quote exactly, but it was something like, it's not the evildoers that are causing the problem, because they're only like a bunch of, you know, corrupt billionaires. There's only a handful at the top of this pyramid. And we, by our fear and ignorance, hold them in power. The problem is the people that know and do nothing. This is the largest part. It's not the people in fear and ignorance. Because I have a lot of empathy, actually, for people who are in fear and ignorance, you know, because they're trapped in their own mind and their own mindset. And it's hard to kind of move them out. But there's a lot of people out there that know this is a scam, that know these masks, friends of mine, colleagues of mine, that know these masks are bullshit, but still they put them on and go to their office every day. You're contributing to the narrative. You're contributing to the lie. Stand up, grow some balls, make a change, because it's on you. And healthcare professionals, right? Nurses, doctors, we have to be educating our people. Sandra's not a doctor, but you know, this was her service, to do up a little chart of mask facts for your patients. Mask facts, because we as regulated healthcare professionals have a duty of informed consent. What does that mean? It means we have to give an option, and we have to give the side effects of wearing a mask. You may get dizzy if you wear a mask. You could fall down if you're starting to feel nauseous or sick, or you know, you're noticing any numbness in the side of your face or difficulty. You know, we have a protocol for stroke. This, reducing your oxygen, is kind of the first step to that, right? So you as a healthcare practitioner owe it to your patients. You owe it to your circle and your family to give them the facts, right? Mask facts. Simple thing, right? You won't lose your license for that. You won't lose your license because you're just informing and giving consent to a health practice that your restaurant owner is trying to reinforce, right? Another thing. This is mask wearing is a medical procedure. So what gives the restaurant owner or the business owner authority to do that? So be an activist, and part of being an activist is, and you know what? I didn't really want to be an activist. I didn't kind of sign up for this. It wasn't like my dream. I didn't say one day, oh, I want to go out and be an activist. I want to kind of give up everything I own and go speak for humanity. It wasn't kind of what I had planned. I was very comfortable in my practice. I loved my family practice for 22 years. But when you see an injustice, you have a choice to sit in fear and ignorance and give consent to the process, or you can speak up. What will you do? An activist, share information with the regulators. Vote out people who are not congruent with your values. Take part in protests, social media, share the information. It was great to see Johnny last night. I think this is the 5th episode of their podcast, but they're trying to get information out there. I mean, whatever your gifts are, if it's writing, if it's singing a song, if it's painting a picture, I mean, whatever it is to get the message out there, use the gifts that you have and just do something, right? Don't sit with the mask. You know, reducing your oxygen so you can't think straight, drinking your fluoride water that's kind of calcifying your pineal gland. You know, do something. Be an activist. Go to your school. Tell your school you're appalled with this. You're appalled that your child is going to be put in a mask and it's going to reduce their oxygen. It's going to affect their brain. It's going to affect their productivity. Or as some of my friends, like Shannon and Andrew, who have a vaccine-injured child and 2 other children, they're taking them out of public school. Setting the example, that opens my heart, because if you could see their challenges, you would understand how important it is to these parents to do what's best for their child, right? So Ethan is quite a challenge. You know, he needs one-on-one most of the time, and 2 other kids, but they're gonna homeschool their kids. Why? Because they're not gonna contribute to the agenda. So I would encourage parents to look for community homeschool groups. Tara Lynn had posted something about that. Tara Lynn, I noticed she had commented on Andrew's post about a community group or community teaching or learning. So if you're a parent and you don't want your child to put on a mask to go to school, and you don't want them taking part in this agenda that they have in mandatory vaccines, there are other options. You just have the courage to do what's best for your kids. It's not easy, right? It's not easy being a parent. It's not easy making the right choice. But if you don't, you'll have that on your conscience, right? I think this is the shift. Chris mentioned last night, that we for the last hundreds of years, we've lived in a patriarchal system. And now we're kind of shifting into kind of a matriarchal system. What I would like to think is kind of the return of the divine Sophia. The pendulum shifted. And this is our maternal instincts. This is what contributes. This maternal, feminine presence, divine feminine presence, cares about the next generation. It nurtures. It doesn't have linear thinking. It has global thinking that thinks, how will this affect this and this and this? And how will this affect 7 generations back? Vote out the people who aren't congruent with you and vote in. Take a look at the National Citizens Alliance. I just knew they existed 2 weeks ago when Adrian came out and helped us do readings at Northwood, because at Northwood, as you know, that's Northwood Manor Long-Term Care Facility here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. 51 out of the 58 deaths were at Northwood. So we went to see kind of what was happening, and they have a cell tower right around the corner, and likely at this long-term care facility, they would have been also given the flu vaccine, which Judy Merkovich says is kind of a risk factor for death, and that they, Dr. Robert Strang neglected to mention that as a risk factor, the flu shot, but it is. So vote out those. So as an activist, you're going to educate, aggravate the current paradigm, aggravate your MLA that you voted for, that you put in power, aggravate them to wake up and to start speaking your truth, because ultimately this is the problem. The government doesn't rule us. We elected those officials to carry through our voice in government. They're our representatives. They work for us. They work for us. So if you have an employee that's not working, that's not congruent with your values, what do? Boot them out. And then vote in somebody that's going to be congruent, that's going to take care of the safety of you and your kids. And we have corruption right now in our government. It's not just liberal, as somebody I spoke to had said from NSC, the National Citizens Alliance, had said, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is just a symptom. This has been going on for a long time. And there's controlled opposition even within the different parties, that they are playing us. But we need to vote out those people that aren't congruent and vote in as someone aggravating the current situation and educating, then litigating, right? Litigating. Taking them to court, like Rocco Galante with Vaccine Choice Canada. Take them to court. Push back. Punch the bully in the nose. Don't sit there and take it. And then to legislate. We need legislation to protect our human rights. And I know there's a group rewriting the Canadian Constitution. I would encourage you to make an alliance with a political group, maybe with National Citizens Alliance, because you can rewrite the Constitution, but it goes nowhere unless you have an arm in that political government. So for those who might be part of Unify the People movement, I think that's a great idea. You just need to make an alliance with somebody who's in government who can bring through some of your ideas and changes. And then another point is really to keep healthy. To do what you can to keep your own body healthy and your mind especially. So like I said, good foods. Try to avoid the chemicals in your food and your water and your air. To think good thoughts, because your mind, it's your thoughts and your beliefs that control all the other body processes, right? Control your actions and your habits and ultimately your destiny. So right now I want you to think, I am empowered. I stand in my power, in my human rights. I'm a free man, free woman on the land, and I will stand up for my children and my children's children and the health of our planet and our earth. This has to be your mindset. Otherwise, you'll be scared and you will be silent. So keeping healthy. What else can you do? You can support your local businesses, because part of this scam is to take out the middleman, is to take out all these middle businesses, these small business owners. So support your local businesses. Shop local, take part in community shared farmings, bank locally, really support the people around you, support the small business. Share that post that I'm going to say, give your business owners an option that they can post in their buses, in their restaurant, in their store, saying, I understand if you don't have a mask on, I understand you have a medical condition. Give them an out. We the people create the alliance. And in a video I'd seen with Sasha Stone and David Martin was in it, and Pam Popper, and Sandra had shared this link with me. Who else was there? Peggy Hall, with the Orange County mask, the healthyamerican.org. As David said, we the people have the power. We always have. The problem is we don't believe it. We don't believe it, because if you did believe it, why would you be wearing a mask? Keeping healthy, support local farmers. I also did an interview with Alfred Weber, and thank you for that, and thank you to Karen McDonald for setting that up. But I talked about quantum technology. So I'm studying this Genius system, which is a biofeedback, and it works at assessing and giving harmonic balancing of your system. Because we're living in a world now where vibration is the issue. Vibration in the way of fear, right? Vibration in the way of technology, and that's affecting our internal vibration or our health. So plant medicines work on a vibrational frequency. Homeopathic and quantum technologies work on a quantum frequency. So this is what you need to be investigating. So Alfred says, do you think the health department would be open to, that? And I've said no. The health department has a pharmaceutical agenda. They have since the Flexner report reported on that in 1910, when the pharmaceutical companies took over the medical schools, right? They have their agenda. It's pharmaceuticals. The agenda right now in this whole lockdown is the vaccine. You see, it's not about a virus. They created a virus in the lab, but many of us had it and survived it. The agenda, the true corruption comes by you rolling up your sleeve and, being connected to AI technology, where they genetically modify you from being human to being sort of a hybrid human. Sounds strange, right? Sounds like kind of a science fiction movie, but the research is there to support it. And now more and more people are coming forward, like Judy Merkovits and Celine Solom with the FEMA, and doctors are speaking out, because we need to stay together, because the power is in the people. It's not in this handful of corrupt billionaires. And speak and share truth. Again, it's important. Dr. Zach Bush talks about the coronavirus as unmasking toxicity in our bodies. He says it will be, it'll affect people who have, the flu shot, who have toxins in their body, who are exposed to the 5G radiation, who have an environment where there's a lot of environmental pollutions. So it actually unmasks, it highlights when you already have a problem. I would say the coronavirus on a global scale has the same purpose. It's unmasking toxicity. Johnny asked me last night in the video, do I think it will ever go back to pre-COVID days? And I said, I hope not, because then the problems were underground, right? It was all secret. The sex trafficking business, the other billion-dollar business behind pharmaceuticals and illegal drugs, is the sex slave trade. And we see now our billionaires are all involved in that too, because again, it's a billion-dollar business. So part of my exposing the sex slave trade and putting information up about Jeffrey Epstein and the flight logs, why is that important? Because it's all connected. They're all part of that global elite group that we need to take down. And thank you, God, for Donald Trump, who's helped clean out the swamp. Whatever you think about Donald Trump or whatever opinions you have on him, he's the president that has arrested more sex traffickers than any other president in history. And that is important. He's trying to navigate the swamp, without drowning. So some of the things that he may suggest, some things may not make sense, but I feel he's working in our best interest, and I hope with this election the American people realize that. He's also defunded the WHO, the World Health Organization, which again is a corrupt organization. He took over the Federal Reserve, many other things, accolades for Donald Trump, but I think that's important. So I think that was all I wanted to mention. The other thing, besides protecting your immune system, again, I have this in the article of Second Wave, how you can protect your immune system, is, the D3. Johnny talked about this last night, but vitamin D3 instead of D2. D3 doesn't have to be broken down in your liver. You need 1,000 international units per 25 pounds of body weight. Being out in the sun is fine, but you'd have to be naked for 20 minutes on each side to get kind of 10,000 units. So taking a supplement is really important. Vitamin C, and Andrew Saul, S-A-U-L is the reference I mentioned for that. He says most chronic diseases can be cured with high doses of vitamin C. What do I mean by high? Something in excess of 30,000 milligrams, something to bowel tolerance. So that can be hard on your system if you have a virus. So vitamin C injections, or taking it in a supplement, a liposomal C, or in sodium ascorbate is another way that I take it in a powder. So vitamin C is important. These two things have been well researched in supporting your immune system, not just against things like COVID, man-made virus, but cancers, right? Which is really our body's warning signal that our immune system's not working right. And Dr. Wayne Garland years ago, when I had him on a video, he talked about this vitamin D3 and K2 protecting against many of the cancers. So that's important. Vitamin A is also important. Iodine, because most of us are deficient in iodine. So again, those things I put in the article, things that you can keep. But most importantly now, unless you have an iron utilization storage problem, which some people do, most people would benefit from having a natural iron supplement. Why is that? Because iron or hemoglobin is a carrier for oxygen. And one of the side effects that I don't know if I mentioned about the radiation poisoning, the 5G technology, is that it affects how hemoglobin couples to oxygen in your lungs. So it will give you breathlessness. It will give you, like we've seen with the COVID cases, right? People that can't breathe, but their lungs are clear. So it's not pneumonia because their lungs aren't congested. And I'm part of a radiology research group online with medical doctors and other radiologists. Chiropractors are radiologists when we graduate. And looking at the lung x-rays of the COVID patients, many of them were clear. So it wasn't a typical kind of respiratory distress by fluid in the lungs. I mean, the lungs were clear. So I believe that it is this radiation poisoning affecting the hemoglobin oxygen coupling that they will label as coronavirus. So taking an iron, a natural iron, Floridex is what I take, 2 little capsules a day, I think is wise right now with the environment. Another article that I'll post is about homeopathic, and there's certain homeopathic remedies that help detox from radiation poisoning. That's something else you can do for yourself. In addition to, if you look up an article, go to my healthtruth.blog, in the search engine, type in 5G, and I'll give you some more information on how to protect yourself from the radiation poisoning. But again, avoiding your smart meter, unplugging your router, go back to cord technology instead of cordless. And there's other devices that I suggest in there, grounding pads and different jewelry, shungite and tourmaline and things that can help protect against the radiation. But just taking the iron supplement and the homeopathic, I think will help. There's also on Gaia a movie that I watched. Amy had sent it to me, so thank you, Amy. I really enjoyed that. And that was with Ben Stewart and George Nori, I think his name is, on Gaia, and it was called Living in 5G, and it had a great perspective, that perhaps the 5G is going to help advance our society. We just need to kind of put safe measures in place, and there's ways that we can implement it safely using different metal alloys, but we need to start that conversation. So have that conversation with your cellular provider today. Ask them about the safety studies. Get it on a live video, post it somewhere. We need to hold them accountable for any injuries. And if they feel like they're on the hook, if they're accountable for injuries, they may look more into safety. Maybe. I mean, this is our hope anyway. But living in 5G technology was a good presentation as a resource. So the second wave I mentioned, the 5G hemoglobin, healthtruth.blog, joining up for Vaccine Choice Canada, vaccinechoicecanada.com, supporting, at least being aware. If you don't want to support them with your donation, just sign up to their newsletters so you can be aware of what's happening in your country. And these are the only national body that are confronting these issues, unconstitutional issues. So my prayers and power to Rocco for all that you've done and continue to do. And if, it's creating awareness, which I think is step one. The protests, we talked about the test, the corona test. I made a note there to talk to about that before we go. Any other questions, by the way? Thank you, Terrell-Lynn. I'm so glad. Helps with oxygen absorption if you can take, which you cannot. Yeah, some people can't take the iron, I know. But there's breathing exercises that you can do. Meditation is really important because your brain controls the rest of your body. So if you can increase your oxygen, holding your breath for 3 or 4 seconds, and then exhaling, you can increase your oxygen saturation just by deep breathing and meditating. So that's another option, Terrell-Lynn, if you can't do the iron. Great spirits have always encountered opposition. I love that quote. But the test. So the COVID-19 test, PCR test. Now, this is outside the scope of my practice. So I would encourage you to go research it for yourself. I can give you some resources and I can give you the information to virologists like Dr. Judy Merkowitz, who again was nominated, I think, for a Nobel Prize for her work in isolating the HIV. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she was. And she says that if you've had the previous flu shot, you will test positive for a corona sequence. Or if you've had a cold, because a cold virus, and that's what corona is, a cold virus, you will test positive. So this whole idea of identifying a one little virus, which is dead genetic material, is bullshit. They're lying to you again. And a president in Africa had sent samples in. He sent samples of like a goat and a fruit and petroleum or oil or something and gave them fictitious names, human names. And sure enough, they came back positive for COVID-19. So not only are the tests themselves skewed and corrupted to make you believe there's some sort of scary pandemic and collect more customers for their vaccine, but it's not valid. And the developer of the PCR test, the developer of the COVID-19 test says it was never meant. The Highwire show, I think, highlighted this last week. So Del Bigtree, the Highwire, I'd highly recommend. I think they highlighted that last week, that the guy who developed the test doesn't recommend it for identifying viruses, right? It's because we could have the virus, this dead genetic material in us. The whole idea of it being an asymptomatic person. If you're asymptomatic, how are you going to spread it to someone? Right? So we're all asymptomatic. If you had a cold, you're asymptomatic. You're a carrier of coronavirus. So not only is the mask bullshit and a lie, the test is bullshit and a lie. So I started thinking to myself, why would they spend all this money and time on these tests? Why would they introduce the tests into hospitals? Why are they encouraging people? This is my thought. This is my conspiracy analysis of the situation. Thanks for that word, Sandra, by the way. Is that the testing itself is collecting a database, right? They're collecting a database. And the test, I'm going to post this in a video, has a swab going up your nose, and it gets at the top of your nasal passage, right at the cribriform plate. So this is the connection to your brain. There's only one synapse between your olfactory nerves and your brain. This is why plant medicine and essential oils are so powerful, because it's only one sniff and it affects your brain right away. So if they're corrupting the test, as we know, because the goat in Africa and the petroleum oil that they sent in from their car were positive, so we know the tests are corrupt. then why are they doing this test? Unless maybe they're seeding, this is my conspiracy theory, I don't have anything to back this up, but they could be seeding the population with genetic material or nanoparticles, and it would be right into the brain. So do I recommend the test? No, I would avoid it at all costs. If I go into a place and they're asking for my name and number, you can refuse. You don't have to give your name and number, or you can mix up the numbers by accident, you know. But you don't want to be on any lists. You don't want to contribute in any way to the lie, because the test is bullshit. The masks are bullshit. So if you participate, you're bullshit, right? You're contributing to the shit. So we need to stand up and wake up and educate yourself, and then stand in your own truth and human rights. Because if you don't do this for you and your family, no one else will. I don't know if you have any other questions. Thanks, Chris. Yes, they could be doing that shit. Yeah, there's something going on with the swabs. And if you've seen how they're testing, and that forceful plug where they go right back at the nasal cavity, right up, like I said, at the cribriform plate, it looks pretty awful. Yes, thank you, Tyrolyn. Thank you, Chris. All bullshit. Yes, Tyrolyn, it is a shit show, and I don't want to take part, and I'm going to do my best, and I have been doing my best. But you know what? I give a fake number. I seen that, Sandra. Thank you for that. But we need to stand together, right, as people in our humanity, and really care and love our kids, our fellows, right? It's not about putting one person out there and expecting them to do all the work. Sandra did a lot of work when it came to this Unmasked event for 20 people, when really she's out there fighting the good fight for all of us. So we need to band together, support your business. Again, give the information to your business. The podcast, great podcast. Love how you're calling out the bullshit. Thank you, Rose, Tyrolyn. No need to swab so far. Any other questions before we sign out? If it's dangerous, I can breathe on people. Why do they have to jab my brain to test for it? That's right, you know. If you have a cold, do what we've done for years and years and years and years, is stay home, right? Just if you have a cough, if you're contagious, you just want to be home anyway. And then you don't need a mask. You don't need all this other kind of stuff that they're trying to pour on us, unless attempting to irritate and seed. Yes, that's my feeling. Otherwise, why would that be part of the scam? I understand there is a component of creating more fear, but if you don't know these things, you may run up and give your name and go for the test. But so again, it's up to you, people who know, to be educating other people. I mean, we have to try to shift the masses, or else our destiny for our humanity is at risk. It's at stake. But again, like I said, the coronavirus, this man-made virus, really helps unleash the toxicity in our body. But on a global scale, it's unleashing the toxicity in our global corrupt, and we need to band together to take that down. And we do that by standing in our own truth and our own power. So again, thank you all for watching. So appreciate you. So appreciate the videos, and think if I disappear from Facebook for a little while, as I did earlier this week, I'll be back. You know, I just need to kind of reprogram. I was actually quite disappointed with the turnout for the mask event, because again, I had emailed all my friends and colleagues and 50 people here locally and 50 MLAs, and you know, there was 20 of us that had previously committed. So I just felt kind of deflated, I guess is a good word, that there weren't more people willing to sort of stand up and have the courage to stand up for your own human rights. So I had to take a moment to kind of reprogram my own brain and realize that I'm doing the best with what I can, and with what I have and what I know. I trust that you're going to do the same. And if you're not speaking up for yourself, if you don't have the courage to speak up to your provincial association, to your regulatory body, to your government, to your MLA, if you don't have the courage to speak for yourself, speak for your kids. Speak for someone else's kids, because they don't have a voice, right? Remember, there's dozens of people didn't participate. That's right. So there's an opportunity for you, and we'll keep in touch with Sandra and Chris Sly. Chris Sly is our Canadian representative. He's networked with Peggy Hall, who's the healthyamerican.org, the lady who had overturned, the masks in Orange County. So Chris and Peggy are in cahoots and in conversation. And Chris is, the one that's organizing these Unmasked events for all of Canada. And Sandra Saunders, I hope you get the courage to do it again, and maybe we'd have a better turnout next time. Maybe there's more people willing to be empowered. But again, thank you, Robin. More is being done at the quantum level. Yes, that's true. I love you too, Rose. And Robin, the work you're doing affects millions. Thank you. That's heart-opening. Okay, so I would invite you to reach for the stars, to envision and achieve your best and the best for your family. And most of all, try to enjoy the journey and realize that humor is a great antidote to the fear and ignorance in our society. This is Dr. Dina Churchill, signing out.